years ago, Susan and I travelled to Central Australia to explore that part of this continent that had always drawn us in, but we'd never quite made. We went and visited Uluru and Katajuda. We stayed at the accommodation some kilometres away, but in the distance was the rock, rising up out of the desert floor. And over those days we stayed there, I was drawn time and again to go out and look at the rock. And in the vast distance of Katajuda as well. We took a trip to the rock at sunrise and watched as the sun rose behind the rock, behind Uluru in the distance, and saw the changing colour of the sky, of the landscape unfolding in this new day. And looking back over to Katajuda, the sun, the early morning sun reflecting off that rock, the red iron in these rock formations reflecting different colours. It was mesmerising, and every moment was new, and standing there, this collective group of a few hundred people perhaps, wow, ooh, ah, this combined collective gasp of wonderment, and the clicking of cameras and phones, and everyone wanting to capture the moment, hold the moment, because every moment was rich and full and beautiful and diverse. It was a stunning experience that just drew you in. And then we saw Katajuda and Uluru at sunset, equally majestic. The changing colours of the sky around, reflecting colour changes in the rocks themselves and in the landscape around. We were mesmerised once again and drawn into this wondrous experience. When we walked around the rock, many times the rock just seemed to draw us in, and you found yourself touching it, touching Uluru. Throughout this experience, it was an experience. It was this mystical, wondrous, mysterious experience. Whilst we were there, we heard many stories of the indigenous people and their spirituality, the sacredness of the rock and the rock formations and the landscape. We heard the Dreamtime stories of its formation and what the different patterns on the rocks meant. Stories that are ancient and have deep truth in them. Not the scientific truth that we also heard. There was this mixture of ancient mythology, if you like, of the Dreamtime stories with their deep and profound truth about life and spirit. And the scientific studies which told us what the rock was about and how old and all sorts of other information. But as much as the science could tell us about the rock, it could never uncover this mystical, mysterious experience of the rock. And I think for me, that's a parable, a metaphor of life. That the more we live life, the more mysterious and wondrous it is. When we walk daily through the bush tracks around Toongabbie Creek, the bird song, the clusters of birds flying, the life amongst the reptile life, the trees, the sounds, the changing nature of it, the wonder, the seasons. There is mystery and wonder, and science can tell me much about it and its creatures, but it can't explain the experience, the beauty, the sacredness, the wonder, that sense of deep mystery at the heart of all things. This week in Mark's story of Jesus, we jump to the middle of his story. in chapter 9. And the context is that he's been talking with his disciples, telling what's going to happen. They're travelling to Jerusalem, and there the powers and principalities of the world, religious and political, will arrest him, sentence him, and crucify him. And then he says, on the third day I will rise again. Wonder, mystery, confusion, then and now. What does this mean? And in this story we read this week, he then takes the inner three of the inner disciples, if you like, up to a mountain. And when they get to the top of this mountain, his features, his appearance is transformed, changed. He glows white. And in this mystical, visionary experience, the disciples see Moses and Elijah standing with him, what one commentator calls a divine conference on the mountain. For some it's the law and the prophets of the Jewish faith, Moses the law, Elijah the prophets. But both of these have experienced the mystical and the wondrous and the mystery of God in their own ways. And they represent these traditions, I suppose. But Jesus is the one who fulfills. That the law that was given through Moses, the formation of a nation, liberation out of oppression and the formation in this liberated community of God's people. But they treat the law as a belief system, tight and regulated and defined and judgmental and exclusive, keeping people out, excluding. The law has become something it's not and filled with injustice. The prophets who continue to speak and utter a new way under God were heard and then shunned, set aside as people held on to their belief systems, their own knowing, their own ways, and walked their own way. And Jesus is the one who comes to turn this around and invite us in once again into the new way of God, the reign of God. And there on the mountain, Peter, the one who's taken Jesus to task down the bottom of the mountain, saying, oh, you can't go, you won't be killed, you're going to reign. You know, he had in mind this way of power and might and violence that was typical of the leaders of the time. And Jesus said, I'm none of that. And on this mountain, Peter again wants to do something. He says, surely we'll build some booths, some altars on the mountain for you and Moses and Elijah. He wants to hold the moment and create a religion almost around it, a belief system, a control and define and hold. And Jesus says, and out of this light, this brilliant light that shines on this moment, a cloud comes over and there's darkness in the cloud, but a voice says, this is my own dear son, listen to him. For Peter, who was listening to the ways of his culture and his community and his belief systems down below, and then who wanted to control and own this moment and define it in his own way, a religious system around booths or altars to worship. The voice of God says, listen to him. It's a different way. It's a way of love and justice and hope and peace. A new way in the world. A new and ancient way. The way that is about me. And then the scene disappears. And they don't journey down the mountain into regular life. But Jesus warns them, don't talk about this, don't speak about it. And I suppose in a sense I get that. When we were at Uluru, you had this experience watching the sun rise over this rock, watching it reflect off Katajuda in the distance, watching the desert landscape change in colour, the sky change from glowing light reds to blues, and just wonderment. You wanted to control it, define it, speak words around it that would define this moment. and yet you can't. And that's the point. You have to experience it. It becomes part of who you are. And in that experience, there is a transformative moment that you're changed. You enter into this deeper experience and wonderment of life, drawn into a deeper thing, a deeper mystery that you can't control or fully understand or define. And you don't have to. And in this is the sacred moment of life. And it comes not just through awe and wonder, but it also comes through suffering. And that's what Jesus holds together. He's going to Jerusalem to die. And in this experience on the mountain, there is the wonderment, the glory, the light, and the darkness of the cloud. The cloud that reminds Peter and the disciples that what he said down there about suffering, about going to the cross, is true. And then there's a mystery beyond that, of rising, of new life, of new hope. And that's what Easter is about. And as we begin the journey into Easter through Lent, this time of reflection and thinking, I invite you into that journey. Not to reject suffering or turn away from it, but maybe to reflect on your own pain, the pain that comes through normal events of life that are hard. The struggle of COVID-19, the difficulties we experience, the isolation or the economic struggles or whatever they are, or the events of life of death and struggle, illness, pain. And through these, God is revealed as the one who doesn't cause it and make it happen, but is at the bottom of it, holding us up and embracing us, that we may experience a new life, a rising, a resurrection. And in these moments, these mystical, mysterious moments, time and space seem to blot out, to dissolve away into this mesmerizing, sacred, holy-filled moment of light and wonder. It comes in the midst of struggle, it comes in the midst of joy, it comes in the midst of life when we allow it to touch us. That's what God invites us into. The journey with Jesus, the journey into the sacred and holiness of God. The way of love. Come and join us. Come and experience these moments of wonder. Amen.